Man, if it wasn't for copyright rules, you could probably hear that Mace song back in the day. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Right?
I'm telling you, man, we're backer than we've ever been.
We are back. Hangover style. We are back. This is Always Talking Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. We took a couple weeks off after our last episode, putting a bow on 2024 with our boys over at 3 Tech. Took a couple weeks off, wanted to refresh. I know there's no offseason in college football, but we felt like we needed a little bit of a break. And honestly, having sick kids with this influenza A running around, man, and us getting sick ourselves, is no joke. So it came at a good time. We're refreshed. We're ready to talk Lance's favorite subject today. We're going to catch up with what's going on the past 2 weeks. We're starting off with coaches and coaching movements. We're going to talk Notre Dame and Chris Ash being the DC and Jawan Sider replacing Dylan McCullough. Running backs coach, we're going to talk Brent Venables and what he's going to do with his staff, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Ohio State coaching staff is getting poached like crazy, obviously with the Jim Knowles news being at the forefront. We're going to start off down in T-Town where the prodigal son has returned after his 9 minutes of fame in Tuscaloosa last year before going to the Seahawks. Ryan Grubb is back. He is back with Kalen DeBoer, his BFF, and they are ready to unleash an offense on the SEC in 2025. The floor is yours, my man. You've been waiting for this OC hire for a long time. It seemed kind of like every day passed, it wasn't going to happen, but Ryan Grubb's finally here.
Yeah, third time's a charm, man. I mean, Saban, before he hired your boy Tommy Rees at Notre Dame, he had Ryan Grubb take a little trip to Tuscaloosa and hop in the lab with him and study some offensive tape. And depends on which rumor you believe, but the offer was made, apparently, to Grubb to be the OC, but at Alabama at that time. And Grubb decided to stay in Washington with DeBoer. Again, there's no hard evidence to see if he ever was actually offered the gig, but most people believe he was. But he turned Saban down to stay in Washington. And then, of course, DeBoer comes to Bama, brings Grubb with him. Grubb stands up in front of the Red Elephant Club down there in Tuscaloosa and everybody and says, "Hi, I'm Ryan Grubb, your offensive coordinator." And that lasted all of about 10 seconds. And he became the OC for the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seahawks this past year had a decent year in the passing game, but struggled a little bit in the run game, and just didn't work out for Grubb and the Seahawks. And consider me the old meme that sits back and says, "What a shame that it didn't work out," because that opened up the door for old Grubb to team back up with his boy, old KD, Kalen DeBoer in Tuscaloosa, as Ryan Grubb is obviously now named the offensive coordinator at Bama. And look, these two guys, they've been together literally almost their entire coaching careers, dating back to their days at Sioux Falls. They were, together at Fresno, together at Washington, and their offenses have been ridiculous together every single time they've been coaching together in the past. But what I think is the biggest deal of all of this is the coaching continuity in general between keeping Nick Sheridan, offensive coordinator this past year for Alabama, on staff to be the quarterback's coach, which is he was like tight ends, quarterback's coach, stuff like that at Washington with Grubb and DeBoer. So Sheridan took a demotion from offensive coordinator to stay on staff with DeBoer and Grubb to be the quarterback's coach. And Jamarcus Shepard, wide receivers coach at Alabama, is staying on board to be the wide receivers coach. He was rumored to be possibly in for the running for the Washington State job. There were rumors of him being in possible runnings for the Purdue head coaching job. So for him to stay on staff, as good as he is at recruiting and developing wide receivers, having the continuity of that group together like they were in Washington is huge. As most of you, if you've been listening to us, following along with us through this past year, I talked about a lot how this past year, the 2024 Alabama team was not Kalen DeBoer's team. It was a player-led team by the senior captains because of the unique situation of a brand new coaching staff coming in January in the same calendar year to take over for the greatest coach in the history of the game. There was no precedent ever before set like this ever before. In the transfer portal era, where someone could come and take all of your players for a 30-day window, but you couldn't go get anybody else. You weren't allowed to go get transfers during that time. So if DeBoer and his staff comes in and acts like there's a new sheriff in town, this is how we're going to do things here around here now, and starts playing tough guy and trying to police everything in a hard-nosed way, I mean, man, you're going to probably lose a lot of your roster. And they couldn't do that this past year. And I think some people laughed at me and talked about maybe I was making excuses and things during that time. And lo and behold, about every single talking head that you see that does a freaking podcast or does a college football show, that's all everybody's talking about now in this offseason. And so I don't know. Maybe I should pat myself on the back for that. But yeah, those senior captains, your Jalen Milrose, are Malachi Moores, they're gone. They did a great job while they were at Alabama, but they're now gone. And this is now Kalen DeBoer's team. He now has his staff that he would rather have, that he is more comfortable with, and he can be more of a CEO and allow someone who he trusts with everything, one of his best friends and one of the best offensive coordinators in the game, is now going to be calling plays for Alabama. I just think that is absolutely huge. I think it's going to be huge for the growth of whoever QB1 is going to be between Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, or incoming freshman Keelan Russell. And I think this, and also Ryan Grubb, his background before he became OC, O-line coach. He's a really good offensive line mind. He sees things like our boy Cole Kubelik would say. He sees things starting at the line of scrimmage. Alabama the last 2 or 3 years has had problems at the line of scrimmage on the offensive line. That is the biggest difference of Alabama's offense in some of the last few years. So I think this is a big deal. Is this the thing that makes all of a sudden dynasty back on? Alabama's going to win the national championship? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, though, that this is a major step in the right direction for the Kalen DeBoer era.
Yeah, last year obviously was rough for the offense at times. And, you mentioned the player-led stuff with Jalen Milroe. If Grubb stays there last year, and doesn't go to the Seahawks, he's got Milroe as his quarterback. And we don't know if Milroe's any better than he was last year. And so you go 9-3 or 9-4 with that team. Maybe it's a chink in Ryan Grubb's armor, right? And so maybe sitting away for a year, again, bringing in a quarterback. And, next episode, we're going to talk quarterback battles. And Alabama's will definitely be a hot one because I'm already on record for saying I would start Keelan Russell over those two, but my opinion really doesn't matter. But we're going to talk about those quarterback battles. So he's going to have his pick. Keelan Russell obviously came out. He's super excited. Ryan Grubb's going to be there. Obviously, we've all saw what he did with Michael Penix. And so, you're hoping that he can duplicate that. And everything being said with Russell, coming in as one of the highest, or if not the highest, Alabama rated recruit ever. You got to think he's going to be on that track. But we're not all top 10 picks in the NFL draft, so it remains to be seen. But it should be fun down in Tuscaloosa. Let's head up north to Columbus. The defending national champions, Ohio State. They have been raided. Offensive coordinator gone. Defensive coordinator gone. Offensive line coach gone.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, brother.
Yep. We know Chip Kelly took that bag from the Las Vegas Raiders and Pete Carroll, over $6 million a year to call plays for the Raiders. I'm not going to turn that down. No way. Defensive coordinator, we all know Jim Knowles. We talked about that last episode. Everybody's talked about that ad nauseum. He went to Penn State, highest paid defensive coordinator. Ohio State's still searching. Justin Fry, offensive line coach. He headed out the door too, and they went to your family's neck of the woods, down in Blacksburg, Virginia, and tried to get Tyler Bowen. It succeeded. And so you've got thoughts on that too, right? You got thoughts on Virginia Tech, losing a guy like that and what it means for that program.
Yeah.
And I've got thoughts too, just kind of how I think it just further, is separating the Big Two, the Big Ten and the SEC, from the rest of the conferences, including the ACC and the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, so Tyler Bowen was not the end all be all offensive coordinator for Virginia Tech. I mean, he wasn't, Chip Kelly or something like that. He's not Steve Sarkisian or Lane Kiffin, but he was a solid OC for VT. And Virginia Tech ran the ball well in the 2 years that he was there, especially when Kyron Drones was healthy at quarterback. And Bashil Tootin at the running back position ran for over 1,200 yards. He had really good 2 years running the football overall under OC Tyler Bowen. But again, he's not the end-all be-all. Most Virginia Tech fans are not just devastated that he's gone. But this is just more of a reflection, in my opinion, of where Virginia Tech is as a program right now. For those that don't know, my entire family is from the New River Valley in Virginia, the Radford, Blacksburg, Christiansburg area. I grew up going to Virginia Tech games. I grew up on the Michael Vick era. My dad was Frank Beamer's first ever quarterback, Frank Beamer's first ever coaching job at Radford High School. So a lot of Hokie roots, you could say, for myself. So I follow that program very closely. And growing up, they were a model of consistency, of just a really good college football program, winning 10-plus games every year. They're a far cry from that now. And they're just not a serious program right now, in my humble opinion. In this new era of college football, you have to invest a lot of money. You just do. That's where we are, to be able to compete. And when you start, obviously, when you lose games, and then when you have a ton of players that, like this past year, Virginia Tech had a ton of players coming back. And they were picked, a lot of people, they were like the darlings pick for everybody to compete for an ACC championship. And they just kind of fell on their face this past year. And then now they just got raided by the transfer portal. And they've got coordinators now leaving to take what is position-wise is a demotion. But the problem is the rest of the country is viewing it as a promotion. Going from a coordinator calling plays at Virginia Tech to be a position coach, an offensive line coach at Ohio State. That's all you need to know right now as far as where Virginia Tech is as a program, that the rest of the country is viewing this as a promotion. That's a problem. And that to me is a sign of Brent Pry. I mean, great guy. Hokie blood through and through. But you better start winning games, brother. You better start winning games.
Yeah, we're going to talk coaches on the hot seat later in this episode, so stay tuned. And he's going to be on the list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But on the flip side of this, for Ohio State, you're getting a guy he's got NFL roots. He came from the Jacksonville Jaguars before he went to Virginia Tech. He coached at Penn State under James Franklin, O-line, tight ends. He's kind of thought of as a really good, like, run game type coach. So Ohio State lands a big hire here to make him the offensive line coach and run game coordinator. And why I believe that this is a really good hire even more is what Ohio State did right after that, which was they hired Brian Hartline and promoted Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator, who has never been the primary play caller. He's been a wide receivers coach, an elite wide receivers coach, and an elite recruiter. He's definitely paid his dues. It's well-deserved. But having another guy like Tyler Bowen, who has called plays, who is a run game coordinator and offensive line minded, to kind of help Hartline a little bit, I think was a good move by Ryan Day, because also Ryan Day by nature is more of a passing game type play caller himself. So having a guy like that and a voice like that in Tyler Bowen, I do think that helps, and I do think it makes sense. But where I want to go with Brian Hartline here, and I know this is probably going to upset some Ohio State fans, but I'm not saying Brian Hartline's going to be a failure. I'm not saying Brian Hartline's not going to be a good offensive coordinator. He may be an elite offensive coordinator and an elite play caller, just like he was a receivers coach and a recruiter. But we don't know that. You're going from one of the best offensive minds and play callers in the entire sport in Chip Kelly. I mean, the NFL and the Las Vegas Raiders think so much of Chip Kelly that they're paying the man $6 million per year to call plays. You're going from that guy to someone who has never been a primary play caller. And everybody just thinks it's a grand slam home run. Like, maybe it is. We don't know that yet. So I think this is kind of a roll of the dice by Ryan Day. And for those Ohio State fans that says, well, you had to make this move. We were going to lose Hartline. You can't lose Hartline. Guys, Ohio State is Ohio State. Ohio State is not Brian Hartline. Come on. The Buckeyes are a model of consistency, maybe the biggest model of consistency in all of college football. Since I have been alive, the Buckeyes have been just consistently a winner. They may not win national titles every year, but they're a double-digit win right in the thick of the title race every single freaking year, no matter who the coach is. So this is a roll of the dice. Now, I know that having a head coach like Ryan Day, who is a really good play caller, it definitely helps. Because if Hartline is not getting the job done, he obviously can take the reins back and start calling plays. But that's just the way that I look at it. Again, I don't think he's going to fail. We just don't know.
Yeah, I think they tried this a couple years ago with him calling plays, and Ryan Day kind of took back over responsibilities. I think possibly with the national championship monkey off of his back, Ryan Day maybe could be a little more experimental, have a little bit longer of a leash for some of these guys that he hires. But that remains to be seen too, whether, if he's going to change, the way he coaches it all. I think the run game will be solid. As usual, they got James Peoples coming back. They brought in C.J. Donaldson from West Virginia. Yep. So I think the run game will be solid, as they've got weapons on the outside too. They're going to have a quarterback. So offense is not
how about that? Hey, a first-time primary play caller with a redshirt freshman quarterback. And I know that the job is not won yet. Like Julian Sayin is not the named QB1 yet. I think we could probably, unless he gets injured or something unforeseen happens, he's going to be QB1.
It's going to be a young quarterback regardless.
Exactly. You're going to have a first-year starter at quarterback with a first-year primary play caller. But again, the weapons that they're going to have, like you just said, my goodness. And we've got to mention the defensive coordinator deal. They have not made a hire there yet. But if you believe the Auburn beat writers and the folks that cover Auburn and get paid for a living to cover Auburn, out of nowhere yesterday, DJ Durkin, Auburn defensive coordinator, all of a sudden gets a $2.5 million per year new contract, making him the second highest paid coordinator in the sport. And as soon as that happened, I texted my boy Tyler here and said, who came after him? And I started thinking, there's not a lot of DC jobs out there available in college football other than Ohio State. And I'm like, no way Ohio State was coming after DJ Durkin. And DJ Durkin's a solid DC. He is. He's solid, and he's a really good recruiter. But, I mean, I don't think that he's kind of looked at as like one of the top 2 or 3.
Is he $2.5 million? Is he worth it?
I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how Auburn does going forward. But all of a sudden it starts coming out that Ohio State and Ryan Day was making a run for DJ Durkin to come be the defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. And again, do I know that that's 100% factual? No. But the Auburn beat writers and the folks that cover Auburn for a living, that's what they reported. So I guess I should say sources say that Ryan Day and Ohio State was coming after DJ Durkin. But whether it was Ohio State or whoever, somebody was, because there was no reason for Auburn to just out of nowhere, I'm going to more than double this man's salary to stay and be our defensive coordinator just because we like the guy. You don't do that unless somebody's trying to come get you and Durkin and his agent now have leverage for Auburn to keep you. So the search still continues for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes for their DC. And in my opinion, that hire, the DC hire, is by far the most important hire for Ohio State. Because what was the biggest difference for Ryan Day's Buckeye teams this last 3 years?
Yep.
The physicality and the elite play of that defense. And who was the DC? The best in the country in Jim Knowles. So they better go get somebody who can play call on that side of the ball if they want to continue to compete at a national championship level.
Well, continuing here on defense, let's head out to Norman, where Brent Venables is getting back to his roots, and he will be calling the defense. Not surprising, really. Brent Venables is.
I love it.
Some would say he's in a make or break year, and
he is.
You know, who better than to control your destiny than yourself, right? If he's gonna go down, he's gonna go down calling his own defense. And if you think about Brent Venables and his track record, like he was Jim Knowles before Jim Knowles, right? I mean, he was at Clemson. He was the hottest name. That's why he got the Oklahoma job, obviously with the ties there. But, you know, he got the Oklahoma head coaching job because of his performance while at Clemson. So give me your thoughts on Brent Venables and the defense there in Oklahoma, how it could improve, obviously, you know, off a down year, 6-7 season, and then kind of on the Oklahoma offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that we could say of probably the last, 15, 20 years, the best defensive coordinators in college football over this time period, you could say would be Kirby Smart, Brent Venables. Kirby Smart when he was at Alabama, Brent Venables when he was at Clemson, and Jim Knowles over the last few years. And so, yeah, to your point, with your job on the line, you coaching for your job this year with a lot of pressure that Brent Venables is probably feeling this year, he swung for the fences and tried to hire Jim Knowles as his DC. It didn't work out. So I don't know why he would go get someone that is not only anywhere near the same level as he is of calling a defense. So he just named himself defensive coordinator. And I remember when Sark left Alabama for the Texas job, he talked about this after the fact, that he got advice from Nick Saban when he left to go be the coach at Texas. And Saban, of course, put in a major word for Sark to be the head coach at Texas. And Saban's advice to him was, this time around, you need to still do what you do best, which is call plays. You need to continue to call plays. And I just don't know why that, like, in college football, when you've got someone that is like an elite play caller on whatever side of the ball it is, that you give that up to someone that's a lesser version of you. And the only reason that you should give up those duties is if you do have someone, again, like a Jim Knowles. So he swung for the fences for Knowles, didn't work out. So Venables is going to call the defense. And honestly, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you should be ecstatic about this because he is one of the best. Now, obviously, they're losing quite a bit on that side of the ball to the NFL, but they're in good hands with Venables calling the defense. And I love the hire at offensive coordinator, though, that Oklahoma did with Ben Arbuckle. I know that was made weeks back, but Oklahoma now has one of the top 10, like, play calling combinations in college football. Roster-wise, yet to be seen.
Well, the big question for Venables is that in a lot of the games last year, his decision-making as far as, like, time management, all this stuff, calling timeouts, it was called into question a lot. So with him calling defensive plays, how much does that take him away from, kind of like the CEO type role, let's go forward on 4th and 2 or not? Like, if he's over there talking to the defense, offense has got the ball, it's 4th and 2 at the 50-yard line, you're going to have to basically rely on Arbuckle to make those decisions, right? Or, you're going to have an analytics guy, but he's going to be talking directly to Arbuckle if you're focusing on the defense. That's the problem I see here.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Obviously, when you're calling plays, you're no longer can have as much of a CEO role, but he'll still have it.
Yeah. Speaking of defense, Notre Dame lost defensive coordinator Al Golden to the Cincinnati Bengals. He couldn't turn down that NFL money, the NFL DC position. So they were looking around. They were rooming for Jim Knowles as well. But they went and found Chris Ash from the Ashes, you could say. Nobody really heard of him. He had just been kind of hanging out since, he was defensive coordinator in 2020 for Texas, safeties coach for the Jags in 21, worked for the Raiders as the DB coach for a couple of years, then back as like a scout last year for the Jags and Doug Peterson. And he kind of came out of nowhere. Like this name kind of came out of nowhere. But Marcus Freeman has kind of earned a lot of respect in people's minds on kind of like, you're not going to question a lot of his hires anymore.
Again, man, I really like this hire. People are going to just look at like, oh, we got this random guy from the NFL that was a failure head coach in college football. Well, wasn't that kind of what the book on Al Golden was when he came to Notre Dame? That the outside world, outside of South Bend, and maybe even some people in South Bend probably weren't just thrilled with the hire. And I remember when Sark came to Bama to be the OC, when he was, not doing super well with the Falcons in the NFL. It wasn't looked at very fondly, at the time. And it, of course, ended up being a huge success. Obviously, Al Golden ended up being a huge success at Notre Dame. It's yet to be seen with Ash. But, I mean, Ash was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State when they won the national championship years back when they beat Oregon for the national championship game back in like the 2014 year. So he was thought of well enough. If you know anything about the Urban Meyer era at Florida and at Ohio State, that dude did not hire idiots on his staff as coaches. He always had an elite staff around him, and he trusted Chris Ash enough to be his defensive coordinator. So he's a national championship winning defensive coordinator in his time. And like Tyler said, Marcus Freeman in his young coaching career has absolutely earned the right for people just to trust him that he's making the correct hires of the staff around him. And all he did was go last year and hire Mike Denbrock away from LSU as OC. And so people just need to trust him that he's making the right hires here like he did with Al Golden, that Chris Ash is going to be a good hire as DC for them.
How about the offensive side of the ball? They lost Dylan McCullough. I think he went to the Raiders as well, right? Pete Carroll's just poaching everybody. And they went and they hired Jawan Sider, who was the running backs coach at Penn State, who just had a lot of success running against Notre Dame in that Orange Bowl with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And Jawan Sider had a lot of success with Miles Sanders a couple of years back, too.
Yeah, I mean, he was like run game coordinator for Penn State, and he's been a really good recruiter and obviously a great developer of talent with coaching Miles Sanders and, like you said, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. So, I mean, imagine being a running backs coach and you're like, dang, I'm going to leave Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Well, if you're going to do that in college football this year, it better be for Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price.
Yeah.
So interesting that he would leave Penn State like that, though, to where he's just going to be a running backs coach. He's not like a run game coordinator or anything, no title like that. Again, it just shows the respect that these guys have for Marcus Freeman. And also a veteran like Mike Denbrock. So that was a really good hire, obviously, again, by Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman there.
Well, Marcus Freeman, Ryan Day, Kalen DeBoer, none of them this year really going in to 2025 are going to be on the hot seat. Brent Venables, we'll see. But Andy Staples on 3 released a couple weeks ago his 2025 college football coaches hot seats. I think there were 6 or 7 guys on there. We're going to go through the list. I'm going to ask you 1 to 10, 1 being coldest, 10 being the hottest. How hot are each of these coaches' seats going into next year? And we're going to start with a little bit of a softball. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Virginia Tech coach Brent Pry.
11.
Okay. Scorching.
Yeah. And again, reason being, this past year, the expectations that they had the second most returning production of any team in all of college football. And again, I'm pretty close to this program and know a little bit about it. And the amount of money that Brent Pry's done a wonderful job of trying to win back the state of Virginia, because the previous regime and Justin Fuente, when he came in after Frank Beamer, he did about everything you could possibly do wrong. He alienated Virginia Tech from the Tidewater and Virginia Beach District and Hampton, Virginia area, where there is a massive fertile recruiting ground there. Just ask Travion Henderson, who went to Ohio State. He was from that area. There's a ton of others. I'm not going to go into all of them. And it allowed the Penn States, the Mac Browns at North Carolina, and other programs, Ohio State and others, have now owned those areas, because Justin Fuente decided he was going to go out and recruit just nationally, and that we didn't need to just recruit the state of Virginia anymore. So Brent Pry comes in and immediately hits the ground running and goes to all these high schools and starts trying to win back the state of Virginia. But how do you start winning? What do you think wins back big time recruits, Tyler? Winning. Yeah, winning. And so this past year was their year to really start turning the tide. And it just didn't happen. So now they lose all these people in the transfer portal, and they're losing coordinators to go be position coaches. And some of the big Hokie Club members and your big boosters and all of that are becoming weary and maybe not starting to believe anymore. So he needs to win this year. And if they go out and throw another 6-6 out there, or a 7-5, I don't know that he'll survive.
Yeah, the expectations were high last year. He did not succeed. Going into next year, just looking quick glance, I mean, they open up with South Carolina in Atlanta. That's a tough one. They get Vanderbilt the very next week, so they open up with 2 straight SEC games, so props for them for scheduling that. They got to go to NC State. They're going to have to score some wins late in the season at home against Louisville and Miami. Winning at Florida State, depending on what they look like next year, wouldn't hurt either. But you're going to have to improve on obviously the 6-6 record. 8-4 probably gets the job done. It shows improvement and everything. But yeah, another 6-6 season, and he might get the axe. Let's move on to another ACC school, except they're on the Pacific Coast. Stanford, Troy Taylor. He made an interesting hire this offseason too, getting Andrew Luck to come be the GM for Stanford. And he was on Pardon My Take a couple weeks back. A really interesting interview. If you guys want to go listen to it, it's fun. But he talks about Stanford a lot. He talks about what they're planning on doing, how they're planning on bringing in talent. But that's a tough job as well. But we've seen it can be done. I mean, David Shaw, obviously Jim Harbaugh, those guys, I mean, had Rose Bowls. They had guys like Bryce Love, Christian McCaffrey, quarterbacks like Kevin Hogan in there. I mean, they've proved you can win in Stanford. And Palo Alto is a very beautiful place. They can get people to come in there. But, you know, you got to do better than 3-9. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with you what you're saying as far as those coaches. They've proven they can do it, but I highly disagree with the part of that we're on a completely different planet of this era of college football, and Stanford is living on a different planet from where we are. Like the Stanford regime themselves, the university, like they just want to be the academic prowess and all of this stuff. Like they don't give a piss about winning at a high level. They're not doing the things necessary to do that. I'm just picturing this right now. Can you picture Stanford, like the upper echelon of the athletic department and the president of the university and that group sitting around saying that we should be paying millions of dollars for high school recruits and players to come play football there? They're not doing that.
Their eyes are going to be open soon. I mean, Notre Dame really is.
But
academic institutions, and I mean, Notre Dame is up there. Obviously, Duke won 9 games. Vanderbilt had a really good season.
But Notre Dame,
Northwestern has had good seasons. Like you have to spend money, and you know they've got money. They've got very wealthy alumni, right? But it's just you gotta invest. Like you were talking about earlier with Virginia Tech, you gotta invest. So
far,
Troy Taylor, Troy Taylor, 1 to 10, hot seat. Where's he at?
I'll say 9.
Okay.
I'll say 9
So
for him.
we got a couple ACC coaches here that are they got to be feeling the heat. Let's move on to the Big 12. Cincinnati, Scott Satterfield, 1 to 10. Where's he at?
Honestly, man, I think he's probably at about a 10 because I think people like Kenny Dillingham in Arizona State, what they just did this past year, pick preseason to finish last in the league, and then they end up winning the league and going to the college football
Yeah.
playoff and getting a bye in the playoffs. I think that type of situation speeds up the process of the hot seat for someone like Satterfield.
And I will tell you, and everybody listening, Lance has been on record. Obviously, we had a slow coaching carousel this year with the Power Four conferences, but with all the money flooding in and the NIL, obviously, and then the revenue sharing, he's told me many times that 2026 next year at this time, here in 11 months, has a chance to be pretty wild. We got a lot of these coaches that are sticking around, like a Scott Satterfield, like a Sam Pittman, like a Brent Pry, who are kind of just on the hot seat. We don't know what's going to happen to them. And Cincinnati, I mean, I know, Big 12 gets kind of knocked around for, not being like, a power conference, but there's really no gimmies in the Big 12 for Cincinnati. Like, just looking at their first 4 games, you got Kansas, Iowa State, UCF, Oklahoma State. You got Baylor at home. You got Utah. I mean, these are all really, there's no elite programs, but they're all really solid programs and really solid football teams on any given year. We saw that, like you mentioned, with Arizona State. Any given year in this conference, we're going to see teams like BYU and Arizona State ascend to the top, while teams like Oklahoma State and Utah go to the bottom. So with Cincinnati and the amount of travel they've got to do and kind of being one of the few Midwest teams that are in the Big 12, I guess you can kind of say West Virginia a little bit, but it's just going to be a tough place. The stadium's not very big. Again, they're going to have to invest some money to see what they can do with that program.
No, I agree. I mean, obviously, too, with the success they had under Fickle, that doesn't help Satterfield's situation. And I just think this is one of those that they're going to be picked by just about everybody to finish near the bottom of the league.
Yeah.
And if they don't overachieve this year, I think he'll be gone. So yeah, he's up there on the hot seat as well.
Yeah. Second year coach Brent Brennan at Arizona, came from San Jose State. It was a somewhat questionable hire at the time. Went 4-8 last year with guys like Noah Fafita and Tet McMillan. 1 to 10. What do you think on Brent Brennan?
I'm going to put him in about a 7.
Okay.
And I think that his situation that he went into was a lot harder than what people realize, just because of the 2 names that you just threw out with Fafita and McMillan. Outside of that, they lost a ton because of the Jed Fish regime that went to Washington. I mean, you've got Jed Fish in that regime trying to poach players from their previous roster at Arizona. You've got people going pro. Your defensive guy goes to Texas to coach under Sark. You lose a couple defensive linemen in the portal, lose a few other guys in the portal. Jonah Coleman, running back, goes to Washington. You're entering a new league in the Big 12. It was a weird transition year. And they're another one, man. After all that stuff came out of the financial problems that Arizona was having after Fish left. So I just think he kind of went into I think he's a good coach. I just think he went into a tough situation. So I'm going to give him about a 7.
How about old Mike Loxley in Maryland? Big Ten finally got rid of divisions. They were out of the Big Ten East, where they had to play those powerhouses every year. It really didn't make a difference. Didn't do them any favors. They went 4-8 last year. They've got a tough schedule this year, going on the road to UCLA. They got to go to Wisconsin, to Illinois. They get Michigan at home. So 1 to 10, Mike Loxley at Maryland. I mean, you got to be thinking he's on his last leg here.
Yeah, I'm going to give him about a 7 as well.
Okay.
Just because I wonder in the situations like this, do they know who they are?
Yeah.
I know some Maryland fans, I don't know if we have any Maryland fans listen, but if there are, like, know the situation that you're in. You're not Ohio State, okay? You're not Michigan, and you're never going to be that. That's okay. Loxley, when he had Talia Tungavailoa and that crew, like, he had some solid players. Obviously, Loxley was hired on the premise that he was going to keep the talent from the DMV at Maryland. He's done a decent job of keeping some good talent there, but obviously the NIL transfer portal world hurt him a little bit in that situation. But 4-8, if I could predict that they're going to go 4-8 this next year, yeah, he'll be gone. But I'm going to put it at about a 7 because I can see Maryland going like bowl eligible or something like that.
Okay. Let's finish off with 3 SEC head coaches here. Let's start off with the aforementioned Sam Pittman at Arkansas. A lot of people thought last year was going to be his last year, but he rebounded with a 7-6 season. Scored some big wins there and held on for another year. But what are we thinking on Sam Pittman? 1 to 10?
10.
Okay, so 7-6. You got to do better at Arkansas.
Yeah, I think it's a 10 because I think he is the prime example of what we were talking about, what you alluded to earlier in regards to the new, with the revenue sharing coming down the pipeline. Obviously, they gave him an extension a while back. They didn't want to fork out a ton of money to have to get rid of him this past year. And with Petrino as his offensive coordinator, with Taylor Green coming back, around 500 is not going to get it done.
Yeah. All right, 1 to 10 on Billy Napier.
I'm going to surprise some people with this one. I'm going to say about a 4.
Yeah, this one's a tough one. I mean, you can go really anywhere from 2 to 9 on this one.
I'm telling you, man, DJ Lagway, I keep using this analogy, the Jimmy Chitwood from the movie Hoosiers. That's his Jimmy Chitwood. When Gene Hackman, the coach in Hoosiers, when he thought he was going to be fired there in that town hall meeting,
yeah,
and Chitwood said, "Coach stays, I play." He goes, "I don't play." Lagway has made it clear he wants to play for Billy Napier, and those players love him. And they showed signs of improvement, and I think they're going to be good this year. I don't care what their schedule says. I think they're going to be good. So I give it about a 4.
Okay, Billy seems to be safe in Lance's eyes. Let's finish up with old brother Hugh down at Auburn. Disappointing year last year. Getting a new quarterback this year in Jackson Arnold. Obviously hanging on to DJ Durkin. Got to stop turning the ball over. You got to think Jackson Arnold will do that less than Peyton Thorne did. So 1 to 10 on Hugh Freeze.
2.
Okay.
This was the one that I just didn't think needed to be on this list. And when Andy and Ari talked about why he was on this list, it made a little more sense just for the fact of, number one, it's Auburn. And if people don't know that situation down there, they're an interesting bunch down there. They're controlled by people outside the program, big-time boosters that call the shots down there. They want influence. And, I mean, the stuff that went on with Malzahn and the stuff that went on with Tuberville before that, it's just always been an interesting situation. But the reason why I don't think that he's on the hot seat, the recruiting class and the talent acquisition that Auburn has had in this last year has been incredible. And I think they're going to have another high-ranking class this coming up year. So I just don't think they're going to be getting rid of Hugh Freeze with the talent they've got coming in. They would have to be like 4-8, something like that, to not for him to be on the hot seat. And I think even then they would give him one more year, because if you fire him, you're probably going to lose your entire roster of all that talent that he just finally has been able to acquire. Yeah. So I don't think they'll be getting rid of him.
Okay, that's it for us. Quick episode today. We'll be back talking quarterback battles, like I said, talking some win totals, just kind of, killing some time here in the offseason, talking about college football. You got anything else?
No, man, just thank you guys for bearing with me here. As you can hear me coughing my head off. Again, I've had the flu, so just trying to get through it.
All right, man. Well, yeah, join us next time, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Follow us on all socials, and we will be back.